She was a quiet girl, the kind who often stayed in the corner of the room watching the world move around her. People in her neighborhood thought she was shy, almost invisible. She didn't speak much in class and rarely joined the loud games during recess. Most kids her age liked to run around, shout, and be seen, but she had other things in her mind. Even though she seemed small and fragile, she carried a secret within her, a love that burned brighter than anything else in her young life. She loved the piano. It all began when she was very little. She remembered the first time she heard the sound of piano keys. Her mother had played a simple song on an old, dusty keyboard that had sat in their living room for years. It wasn't a grand piano, and it certainly didn't sound perfect, but to her it was magic. The notes seemed to float in the air, touching every part of her being. Something clicked inside her that day. She wanted to understand that magic, to feel it under her own fingers, to make music that could make people feel something, just like she had. Her parents were supportive in their own way, but they were not wealthy. The piano was old and lessons were expensive. She didn't have access to a teacher every week, but she never let that stop her. She practiced whenever she could, sometimes using an old keyboard her parents had borrowed from a relative, sometimes just imagining the music in her head and tracing the keys in the air with her fingers. She memorized songs she heard on the radio or on the small television shows she watched. She listened closely to every note, trying to replicate them with precision but also with feeling. Music became her world. School was another story. Her classmates did not understand her. They were loud, teasing, and sometimes cruel. While other kids were excited about games and sports, she would hum little tunes to herself, or tap imaginary piano keys when she walked in the hallways. The other children noticed. Some laughed at her, calling her names behind her back. "Weird girl," they said. "Who even cares about that old keyboard?" They didn't understand the joy she found in music, and they didn't care to try. The teasing hurt, of course. She felt it in her chest every time someone whispered, laughed, or pointed at her. Some days she would sit on her bed, staring at the keyboard in the corner of her small room, wondering if she should just give up. Maybe she was foolish for thinking she could ever be good at this. Maybe everyone was right, and she should focus on being like the other kids, running, shouting, trying to fit in. But then she would touch the keys. The first note would sound soft and imperfect, yet enough to remind her of the happiness she felt. And just like that, the sadness melted away. Music was her home. Her bedroom became a sanctuary. It was small, with plain walls and a single window that let in sunlight in the morning. The keyboard stood against the corner, a little beaten up, but to her it was the most important thing in the world. She would spend hours there, closing her eyes, letting her fingers find the keys, feeling each note travel through her. Sometimes she imagined she was performing in front of an audience. She could almost hear the soft gasps, the clapping, the awe. These were dreams she held close, dreams she kept secret from everyone. Even at home, there were challenges. Her family was busy, her parents working hard to make ends meet. They couldn't always watch her practice, and sometimes she felt lonely. But she learned to be disciplined on her own. She would set small goals, learn a song by the end of the week, practice a difficult part over and over, record herself on a small phone to hear how she sounded. She started noticing improvements, subtle at first, then more obvious. The joy of progress kept her going. She also began noticing the emotional power of music. She realized that some songs could make her feel happy. Others could make her cry. She loved that feeling, that connection between sound and emotion. It fascinated her. She wanted to make people feel that too. She wanted her music to reach into hearts, to make someone stop and listen, to make someone feel joy or sadness or hope, even for just a moment. That became her quiet mission. At school, things weren't getting easier. The teasing continued. During group activities, she was often left out, not because she couldn't contribute, but because the others didn't value what she cared about. They mocked her passion, calling it childish or silly. They didn't see the hours she spent practicing in secret, the sweat on her brow, the frustration when a piece wouldn't come together. To them, it was just a girl making noise on a keyboard. To her, it was life itself. There was one teacher who noticed her, though, a music teacher, older and kind, who would sometimes peek into the classroom and smile at her quietly, humming along with a song in her notebook. This teacher didn't scold or laugh. Instead, he offered her words of encouragement in small ways. "Keep going," he would say softly, or, "I see how hard you're working." Those words meant more to her than she could express. They were like sunlight breaking through a cloudy day, She clung to them. Despite the mockery, she never stopped practicing. She learned to hide her feelings, to smile politely at those who laughed, and then retreat to her music. It became her shield and her sword, a way to protect herself from the world and a way to fight back with something stronger than words: her talent. She began exploring more complex pieces, even without a teacher to guide her. She would watch videos quietly when no one was looking, listening to skilled pianists play and trying to imitate them. Sometimes her fingers would fumble, sometimes she would cry out of frustration, but she refused to quit. Every mistake was a step forward, every failure a lesson. Slowly, the notes began to flow more naturally, more confidently. Her music began to sound like something beyond a simple tune. It started to carry her feelings, her thoughts, her very soul. Her parents noticed the change too. They couldn't always afford to buy her music books or pay for lessons, but they saw how much the piano meant to her. They watched as she would disappear into her world for hours, not noticing anything else. Sometimes they would leave a small snack outside her room, or ask gently how her practice was going. Even though life was hard, they found ways to support her quietly, in the small acts that mattered more than words. The girl also began to dream bigger. She imagined a day when she would perform for people who didn't know her, people who might laugh or doubt her at first. She imagined playing and watching faces change, seeing disbelief turn into admiration, hearing applause for her music, feeling the warmth of recognition. These dreams were her motivation. Even on days when the teasing was unbearable, she would think of that moment and continue. There were nights when she would sit by the window after practicing, staring at the stars, imagining the music floating into the sky, reaching faraway places. She felt connected to something larger than herself, a world where music spoke louder than words. In those quiet hours, she found strength, peace, and determination. She was not just a girl being mocked. She was a girl with a voice, a girl with a gift that no one could take away. Even though the world around her didn't understand her yet, she believed in herself. She believed in the hours of practice, the pain of mistakes, and the joy of learning. She believed that one day people would see what she saw. She believed that her music was worth fighting for, worth protecting, worth sharing. And so every day she returned to her keyboard. She pressed the keys with care, feeling each note resonate through her fingers and her heart. She made mistakes, laughed at herself, and tried again. Each day she grew stronger, not just as a pianist, but as a person who could face ridicule and still hold on to her dreams. In the quiet of her room, with the sunlight streaming through the window and her fingers dancing over the keys, she was happiest. She was herself. She was free. She was alive. And though she didn't know it yet, this quiet determination, this secret love for music would soon take her further than she had ever imagined. The journey had only begun, but already it was extraordinary. School was never easy for her. Each morning she walked through the hallways with a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, today would be different. Maybe today, someone would see her for who she really was and not laugh at the little things she loved. But every day the reality was the same. Whispers followed her from classroom to classroom. Little jokes, sharp giggles, sideways glances, things meant to make her feel small. She learned to keep her head down and move quickly, hoping not to draw attention. It was during one of these ordinary days that the moment came, a moment she would remember for years. The school had announced a small talent show, something meant to be fun, to show different skills of students. She saw it as an opportunity, a tiny spark of hope. Maybe she could play a song on the piano. Maybe she could show people a piece of the world she lived in. Maybe they would understand. The problem was her piano was at home. There was no instrument at school for her to use. But she didn't let that stop her. She asked if she could perform her song on the keyboard she had at home. The teachers agreed, thinking nothing of it. She practiced harder than ever, memorizing every note, every rhythm. She wanted it to be perfect, not for herself only, but to show that she belonged in this moment too. The day of the talent show arrived. The auditorium was filled with students, parents, and teachers. Laughter and chatter echoed in the room, creating a wall of noise she had to walk through. She held her small music book tightly, her fingers brushing over it nervously. People turned and whispered as she walked past. Some recognized her. Some snickered. Some made faces that were meant to be funny, at least to them. She felt her chest tighten, but she kept moving forward. When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage. Her heart was pounding like a drum inside her chest. She could see rows of eyes, curious, laughing, skeptical. A few kids in the front whispered jokes about her, trying to get their friends to laugh too. She felt heat rise to her face, but she didn't run. She didn't cry. She just approached the keyboard that had been placed in the center of the stage. She took a deep breath. Her fingers hovered above the keys, trembling slightly. She remembered all the hours she had spent at home alone, practicing. She remembered her mother playing that first song so long ago and how it had made her feel alive. She remembered the teacher who had quietly encouraged her, telling her she could do it. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, imagining the music flowing through her, and then she began to play. The first notes were soft, almost fragile. Some of the students giggled, thinking it was a mistake. She ignored them. She focused on the music, letting it take over. Slowly, the notes began to flow more confidently, and the song started to sound like something more than just random notes. It had emotion. It had feeling. It had her. The laughter in the room began to fade as the melody filled the auditorium. Some students leaned forward, curious. Some parents looked surprised, stopping their conversation to listen. The girl didn't look up. She didn't need to. She was in her own world, a world where only the music existed. Her fingers moved over the keys with care and precision, her small frame almost glowing with focus. For the first time that day, she felt powerful. Not because she was louder than everyone else or because she had the biggest voice. She felt powerful because she was being herself. Every note she played was a little victory over the teasing and mocking she had endured for so long. Every chord was a statement that she belonged, that her love for music mattered. But it wasn't just about proving others wrong. As the song continued, she noticed something else. The audience was changing. Faces that had been skeptical or amused were now calm, attentive, even moved. Some students' mouths hung open in surprise. Some parents exchanged glances, whispering to each other softly. The music had captured them even for a few precious minutes, and they couldn't look away. The final notes of the song rang out, clear and beautiful. She held the last key down a little longer, letting the sound linger in the air. Then she lifted her hands and looked up. Silence filled the room for a heartbeat, a pause that felt like the world itself was holding its breath. And then the applause began. It started softly, almost timidly, and then it grew louder, stronger, unstoppable. People were clapping, some even cheering, some standing. Her heart raced, her eyes glistened with tears, but she didn't falter. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly seen. Not just for being quiet or different or weird. She was seen for her talent, her dedication, her courage. The mocking voices that had haunted her for years were nowhere to be found. In their place was appreciation, respect, and admiration. She felt a rush of warmth and joy that was difficult to describe. After she stepped off the stage, some students came up to her, hesitant at first. "That was really good," one whispered. "I didn't know you could play like that," said another. She smiled shyly, feeling a little awkward but proud. Even a few of the kids who had teased her before gave a small nod of approval, unable to deny the skill she had just shown. Her teacher, who had encouraged her from the beginning, patted her shoulder quietly. "I knew you could do it," he said softly, and she felt a swell of gratitude. It wasn't about proving them wrong, it wasn't about revenge, it was about showing herself and the world what she was capable of. And that was more important than anything else. The experience changed something inside her. She realized that mockery, laughter, and doubt could not stop her if she stayed true to herself. The teasing had been painful, yes, but it had also made her stronger, more determined. Every moment she had spent practicing in her room, every tear shed over a difficult piece, every time she had wanted to give up but didn't, it had all led to this moment of triumph. After the talent show, she returned home with a quiet smile. Her parents were waiting, proud and happy. They didn't need to say much. Their eyes said it all. They had watched her grow, struggled alongside her, and now they could see the results. She hugged her keyboard. Now more than a simple instrument, it was a companion, a friend, and a witness to her courage. Even with the applause and praise, she remained humble. She knew that this was just one step, one small victory in a long journey. There would be more challenges ahead, more people who might not understand, more obstacles to face. But she also knew that she had discovered something powerful, her own resilience, her own voice, and the ability to touch hearts through music. From that day on, The girl was no longer completely invisible. The whispers in the hallways didn't disappear entirely, but they no longer hurt her the same way. She had a secret strength now, a reminder that she could rise above ridicule, that her love for music was stronger than the laughter of others. Every note she played became a testament to her courage, a quiet rebellion against a world that often misunderstands what is rare and beautiful. She continued to practice with the same dedication as before, but now with a renewed sense of purpose. She experimented with new pieces, challenged herself with more difficult songs, and explored the depths of emotion that music could bring. Each day she felt herself growing, not just as a pianist, but as a person who could face adversity with grace and determination. Sometimes, when she played alone in her room, she would remember the faces in the auditorium, the surprise, the wonder, the applause. It filled her with warmth, but also with a quiet reminder. The journey was far from over. There were more songs to learn, more performances to face, more people to inspire, and more moments to prove to herself that she was capable of greatness. The mocking voices that had once seemed so loud were now faint echoes in her memory. They were reminders of how far she had come, of the obstacles she had overcome. And while the world could still be cruel at times, she had learned something invaluable: the power of perseverance, the strength of belief in oneself, and the magic that comes when passion and determination meet. In the quiet of her room, with her fingers dancing over the keys, she smiled. She had faced mockery and come out stronger. She had turned doubt into determination and laughter into music. And she knew deep in her heart that this was only the beginning of a journey that would take her further than she could ever imagine. After the talent show, something inside her had changed. The applause, the awe, the quiet moments when people stopped to listen, it all stayed with her. It was a feeling she had never experienced before, a mix of joy, pride, and hope. But she also knew that one performance did not define her. There was much more to learn, much more to prove, not to others but to herself. She had tasted success, but she wanted to make it even better. She wanted to grow. The days after the show were filled with a quiet determination. She returned home each afternoon, rushing to her small room, greeting the keyboard with a soft smile and sitting down to play. She had realized that talent alone was not enough. To truly express herself, she needed discipline, practice, and patience. She set new goals for herself. She would learn more complicated pieces, ones that challenged her fingers and her mind. She would focus on emotion, not just notes, learning to let music speak for her when words could not. At first, it was difficult. The new pieces she chose were demanding. Some notes were fast and tricky. Others required her to reach across the keys in ways that hurt her small hands. She made mistakes over and over, sometimes stopping to cry quietly from frustration. She wondered if she was pushing herself too hard. She wondered if she could ever reach the level she imagined in her dreams. But she remembered the applause, the astonished faces, and the encouragement of her teacher. Slowly, she picked herself up and tried again. Her practice sessions became almost ritualistic. She would sit in the same spot, her back straight, her fingers poised above the keys, breathing in and out to calm her nerves. She started each session with scales, warm-ups, and small exercises, preparing her hands and her mind. Then she moved on to the pieces she was learning, breaking them down into sections, mastering one part before moving to the next. Each day, the music became a little clearer, a little more fluid. She noticed small improvements, subtle but significant. Sometimes she recorded herself on her phone to listen back. At first, she was critical, noticing every mistake, every uneven rhythm. But gradually, she learned to listen with a gentler ear. She began to hear progress, to feel the emotion in the notes, to understand the power of patience and persistence. She learned that learning music was not about perfection. It was about connection, expression, and dedication. Her family watched silently, proud but careful not to interrupt her. They had seen the talent, they had seen the joy, and they had seen the pain she went through in pursuit of it. Sometimes her mother would leave a small note on her bed. "Keep going. You are doing beautifully." Her father would pause at the door, watching her fingers dance over the keys, a small smile on his face. These small gestures meant the world to her, quiet reminders that she was not alone. School, of course, continued to be a challenge. Some students still whispered, some still snickered, but something had shifted. The girl had gained confidence from her previous performance. She no longer let every laugh or whisper sink into her heart. She held her head high, continued to walk with quiet purpose and let the music inside her speak louder than the words of others. It wasn't always easy, but she was learning to rise above. During breaks, she would sometimes hum new melodies quietly, tapping her fingers on the edge of her desk. A few curious classmates would stop and listen, their initial amusement fading into genuine interest. Sometimes one or two would ask her what she was playing, and she would shyly explain, feeling a flicker of connection she had rarely experienced before. Those small interactions, though fleeting, reminded her that people could change, that understanding could grow. She also began to explore her emotions through music more deeply. She realized that every song she played could tell a story. Some songs could carry sadness, others joy, others hope. She began to experiment, playing slowly and softly, letting the notes linger in the air, imagining the people who might listen and how they might feel. It was as if the piano had become a bridge between her inner world and the world around her, a way to communicate without speaking. One rainy afternoon, she sat by the window, her hands hovering over the keys, listening to the drops of rain tapping against the glass. She began to play a new piece, one she had been struggling with for weeks. The rhythm was difficult, the notes demanding, but she let herself get lost in it. Slowly, steadily, the music flowed. She felt the rain in the melody, the quiet tension, the beauty of patience. When she finished, she leaned back and smiled. She had done it. She had conquered the piece. She felt a surge of pride and satisfaction, realizing that this was what growth felt like. Quiet, steady, sometimes painful, but incredibly rewarding. Her teacher noticed her progress as well. During one of his visits, he sat quietly in the corner of her room, listening to her play. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer advice, just listened. When she finished, he nodded, a rare smile spreading across his face. "You are improving faster than I expected," he said. "Your dedication is remarkable. Keep challenging yourself." His words were a gift, a quiet affirmation that her efforts were not in vain. She began to imagine the future more vividly. She thought about performing on a bigger stage, maybe in front of a larger audience than the school auditorium. She imagined people watching, listening, feeling her music, perhaps even being moved by it. These thoughts were thrilling but also intimidating. The idea of performing in front of strangers was terrifying yet exciting. She knew that to achieve this, she would need more preparation, more practice, more courage. And so she continued to push herself. Every day she practiced longer with more focus. She tackled pieces she once thought impossible, learned new techniques, and experimented with rhythm and expression. She started to understand that music was not just about playing the right notes, but about conveying feeling, telling a story, and connecting with others. This understanding changed the way she approached every session, making her play not just with her hands but with her heart. Despite the progress, she still faced doubts. Sometimes she wondered if she would ever be truly good, if she could ever play in front of people without fear, if she could turn her passion into something meaningful. These doubts were heavy, but they also fueled her determination. She learned to treat them not as obstacles but as challenges, reminders that growth required persistence, patience, and courage. She also began to notice how music affected her mood and mind. Playing the piano became a way to calm herself after a stressful day, to release tension and to find clarity. It was no longer just a hobby or a dream. It was a lifeline, a source of strength and balance. Even when school was difficult, when classmates were cruel, when life felt overwhelming, she could always return to her music and find peace. Friends remained few, but a small circle began to notice her dedication. These were students who admired her focus, who had seen her talent, and who offered quiet support. They didn't mock her or laugh at her interests. Sometimes they would sit and watch her play during free periods, asking questions, encouraging her to try new pieces. These small connections brought warmth to her days, reinforcing the idea that pursuing what she loved could attract genuine understanding and friendship. As weeks turned into months, her skill grew steadily. Her fingers became faster, more precise, more confident. She could play pieces she had once thought impossible. But even more importantly, she could feel the music, shaping it with intention and emotion. She was no longer just playing notes. She was telling stories, expressing thoughts and feelings that words could never capture. One afternoon, while practicing a particularly challenging composition, she paused and looked at her hands. They were small, delicate, yet capable. They could create something beautiful, something that could touch hearts. She realized then that all the ridicule, all the isolation, all the struggles she had faced were part of a journey leading her to this moment. Every challenge had strengthened her resolve, every tear had added depth to her emotion, and every hour of practice had built her skill. Her dreams began to feel closer, no longer distant or impossible. She imagined a day when she could perform for a larger audience, perhaps at a community event or a bigger school gathering. She imagined the nerves, the excitement, the connection she would feel with people listening to her music. She also imagined the pride of her family, the joy of sharing her gift, and the sense of accomplishment she would carry with her. The girl knew that this journey was far from over. There were still obstacles, still moments of doubt, still challenges to overcome, but she felt a quiet confidence that she had never known before. She had learned the value of hard work, the importance of patience, and the power of perseverance. She had discovered that her love for music was stronger than any ridicule or doubt, and that this love could guide her through the toughest moments, and so, each day she returned to her keyboard with renewed purpose. She practiced, she learned, she grew, not for the applause, not for recognition, but for the joy of music itself. She played with her heart, with intention, with emotion, and with the quiet knowledge that every note brought her closer to the dreams she held dear. Little by little, she felt ready for what was coming next. The journey ahead would test her more than ever before, but she knew she could face it. She had faced ridicule, loneliness, and doubt, and she had not only survived, she had grown stronger. She was ready for the next step, ready to share her music with the world in a way that would leave no room for mockery, only wonder. The day of the big performance had finally arrived. She woke up early, even though her body was tired from weeks of intense practice. Her mind, however, was alive with anticipation, excitement, and a touch of nervousness she could not shake. Today was not just another school event. Today she would perform in front of a larger crowd, people she didn't know, people who might laugh, people who might admire. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She dressed carefully, choosing simple clothes that made her feel comfortable and confident. She did not want her appearance to distract her or the audience. She wanted them to focus on the music, on the story she was about to tell with her fingers. She carried her small music book, now worn and familiar like an old friend who had been with her through every step of her journey. Her fingers brushed over the pages, tracing the notes she had memorized so many times, filling her with a sense of readiness and purpose. Arriving at the hall, she felt the energy immediately. People were bustling, chatting, and laughing. The stage was set, lights shining down, rows of chairs filled with faces she had never seen. Some of them whispered, some pointed, some seemed disinterested. She could hear the faint giggles of a few children who might not understand what was about to happen. Her heart pounded, her stomach twisted with nerves, but she reminded herself of all the practice, all the tears, all the quiet hours she had spent perfecting her craft. She could do this. Backstage, she took a deep breath. She closed her eyes and imagined the music, imagined the melody flowing from her fingers, imagined the faces in the audience softening as they listened. She imagined the moment when mockery would turn into admiration, when doubt would be replaced by awe. Her hands tingled, ready to bring that vision to life. When her name was called, she stepped onto the stage. The bright lights hit her, and for a moment she could barely see the audience. She heard faint whispers, but she did not falter. She walked to the piano placed at the center, its polished surface reflecting the stage lights. She sat down, straightened her back, and placed her hands gently on the keys. The first note was soft, delicate, a single spark in the silence of the hall. At first, some of the audience members seemed unsure. They whispered among themselves, some fidgeted in their seats. But as she continued, the music began to fill the room, and something remarkable happened. The melody, full of emotion and expression, started to capture their attention. It was not just notes. It was a story. A journey told through sound. Each chord carried her feelings, her struggles, her hopes. Each rhythm spoke of her perseverance and courage. The laughter that had once seemed inevitable disappeared. Even the children who had teased her before were silent, their eyes widening as they listened. Parents leaned forward, drawn in by the beauty of the music. Teachers exchanged impressed glances, nodding quietly in admiration. She could feel the energy of the room changing, shifting from doubt to wonder, from mockery to respect. She played with confidence now, her fingers moving swiftly yet gracefully, her hands almost floating above the keys. She had practiced this piece countless times, yet this felt different. This was not practice, not repetition. This was life pouring out of her soul speaking through music. She felt the audience listening, feeling, reacting. The emotion in the room was palpable, a connection she had longed for all her life. Her mind drifted briefly to the days of ridicule and teasing, to the moments when she had been laughed at for loving the piano. She did not feel anger nor revenge. Instead, she felt a quiet satisfaction, a validation of her perseverance. Every hour of practice, every tear, every moment of doubt had led to this. And now the music spoke louder than any words ever could. The middle of the piece was the most challenging. Complex rhythms and rapid sequences tested her skill and concentration. She felt a tremor of nervousness, but she pressed on, trusting her hands, her memory, and the countless hours she had spent preparing. Her fingers danced over the keys with precision, yet the sound was never mechanical. It was full of life, full of expression. The audience leaned in, completely captivated. The music held them, as if it were weaving a spell over the hall. She began to notice something she had never felt before while performing, a sense of unity with the audience. She could sense their emotions, their admiration, their amazement. She felt them responding to every rise and fall of the melody, every soft whisper of a note, every powerful crescendo. Music had become a bridge between her and everyone in that hall. She realized then that this was the power she had been seeking all along. Not applause or recognition, but connection. As she approached the final notes, she poured everything she had into them. Her heart, her soul, her entire being seemed to move through her hands and into the piano. The last chord rang out strong and clear, echoing through the hall. For a moment there was complete silence, the kind of silence that makes time feel suspended, that lets every listener absorb what they have just heard. Then slowly a single clap rang out, and then another, and another. The applause grew louder, filling the room, unstoppable, overwhelming. She looked up, her eyes glistening with tears, and saw the expressions of people around her. Some were clapping, some were standing. Some had wide smiles of disbelief. The mockery and doubt that had once haunted her were gone, replaced by awe and respect. She had done it. She had transformed every whisper of ridicule into a powerful statement of her talent and courage. After the performance, people came forward, their faces bright with admiration. "That was amazing," one whispered. "I didn't know you could play like that," said another. Even some of the students who had teased her before approached her, hesitant at first but unable to hide their genuine amazement. You were incredible," one finally said. She smiled quietly, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She didn't need to respond with words. The music had spoken for her. Her teacher approached, eyes shining with pride. "I knew you could do it," he said softly, patting her shoulder. "You've grown so much. Today everyone could see your talent." She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She realized then that this was more than a performance. It was a turning point, a moment that would stay with her forever. Her parents were waiting just outside the hall, their faces full of pride and love. They hugged her tightly, tears in their eyes. "We are so proud of you," her mother whispered. Her father smiled, holding her hand. "You've shown everyone what dedication and heart can do." She felt a surge of happiness, not for herself alone, but for the journey they had all shared together, the struggles, the sacrifices, the quiet moments of support that had led to this moment. That night, as she returned home, she held her keyboard close, brushing her fingers over the keys once more. The notes had not lost their magic. They still carried the joy, the triumph, the quiet power she had discovered. She played softly, reliving the performance, letting the music fill the room and her heart. She realized that while applause was wonderful, the true reward was something deeper. The understanding that her perseverance, her courage, and her passion had the power to touch others, to move them, to create change. The days after the performance were filled with quiet celebration. Teachers complimented her, students looked at her with newfound respect, and her small circle of supportive friends shared in her happiness. But she remained humble. She knew that this was not the end of her journey, only a remarkable milestone. There would be more challenges, more performances, more moments where she would have to face doubt and fear. But she also knew now that she could overcome them. She began to dream bigger. She imagined performing in larger halls, in front of audiences that could span hundreds or even thousands. She imagined sharing her music with people who might never have heard anything like it before. The thought was both thrilling and daunting, but she no longer felt afraid. She had learned the power of preparation, the strength of resilience, and the beauty of believing in oneself. Her journey was no longer just about proving others wrong. It was about growth, connection, and the joy of music. She had discovered that the most important thing was not recognition or applause, but the ability to express herself fully, to touch hearts and to inspire others quietly, through dedication and talent. Every time she played, she remembered the faces in the hall that day, the astonishment, the admiration, the wonder. Those faces were proof of something she had always known deep down. Her music mattered. Her voice mattered. She mattered. And that realization filled her with a quiet strength, a sense of purpose that would guide her for years to come. In the quiet of her room that night, she closed her eyes, letting the music linger in the air. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, but also a spark of excitement for what was to come. She knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would take her further than she had ever imagined. A journey where her talent, dedication, and courage would continue to shine, touching everyone who listened, one note at a time. After the performance, life seemed different. It wasn't that the world had suddenly changed, or that everyone around her now understood her completely. But something inside her had shifted, and that change made all the difference. She walked through the hallways of her school with a quiet confidence she had never known before. The whispers and giggles that had once filled her ears no longer carried the same weight. People still talked, but their words no longer touched her in the same way. She had proven, first to herself and then to the world, that her passion and perseverance could overcome doubt and ridicule. Teachers began noticing her more, not just for her talent, but for her dedication and focus. During class, she remained quiet, but when she played the piano, her entire being seemed to speak. They would sometimes ask her to perform for school events or small gatherings, giving her more opportunities to show her growth. With each performance, she felt more comfortable, more expressive, and more connected to her audience. It was as if every note she played carried a little more of her heart, and people could sense it. Her classmates, too, began to treat her differently. Some of the students who had once mocked her approached her cautiously, unsure of how to act. That performance, it was incredible, one would say, while another might simply nod with admiration. She smiled politely, shyly acknowledging their words. She didn't seek revenge or demand respect. She had learned that talent and perseverance often speak louder than arguments or confrontations. Her music had done that for her, and she let it continue to do so. Even her small circle of supportive friends grew slightly larger. Some of the students who had only observed her from a distance started to approach her more often. They asked questions about the songs she was learning, offered encouragement, and sometimes even shared a quiet moment of awe after she played for them. These small connections became meaningful, reminders that patience, persistence, and kindness could eventually create understanding. She valued these moments not because they elevated her, but because they reflected the subtle influence she had on those around her. At home, the atmosphere was one of quiet celebration. Her parents never needed to announce their pride with grand gestures or words. They showed it in small ways. Her mother leaving a note of encouragement on her bed, her father smiling knowingly when he saw her practicing late into the evening. The keyboard had become more than an instrument. It was a symbol of growth, perseverance, and the love they shared as a family. She spent hours playing for herself, not just to practice, but to feel that connection to the music, to her family, and to the journey she had undertaken. The experience had also changed the way she viewed herself. She had learned to embrace her uniqueness, to see the value in the things that made her different, and to trust that her passions were worth pursuing. Where once she had doubted herself, now she felt a quiet certainty. She knew that hard work, patience, and belief in oneself could overcome obstacles, ridicule, and doubt. This was a lesson she carried not just in music, but in every aspect of her life. As she continued to grow as a pianist, she also began to explore new opportunities. Local events, community gatherings, and small competitions became stages where she could perform and continue to challenge herself. Each performance brought new experiences, new emotions, and new audiences. With each one, her confidence deepened and her skill became more refined. She began experimenting with her own interpretations of pieces, letting her creativity flow and discovering the power of expression in music. She also found herself inspiring others, quietly but effectively. Younger students who had once watched her practice from afar began asking questions, seeking advice, or simply observing her dedication with admiration. They saw someone who had faced ridicule and continued to pursue her passion with determination, someone who had transformed doubt into achievement. In this way, her journey became not just about her own growth, but also about encouraging others to follow their own dreams no matter the obstacles. At school, she was occasionally asked to perform at assemblies or events. The first few times were nerve-wracking, but she approached them with the same calm determination she had developed over months of preparation. She discovered that performing in front of a crowd was not just about technical skill, but about emotion, presence, and connection. Every performance taught her something new: how to handle nerves, how to reach an audience, how to let the music breathe and live on its own. Through all of this, she remained humble. She never saw herself as better than anyone else, nor did she seek praise for its own sake. Her music was personal, a reflection of her journey, and she valued the growth it brought more than any external recognition. The applause and admiration were rewarding, certainly, but the true reward was the satisfaction of knowing that she had overcome challenges, stayed true to herself, and allowed her talent and heart to shine. Even outside of music, the lessons she had learned began to influence her life. She became more resilient in the face of difficulties, more patient with herself and others, and more determined to pursue what she loved despite obstacles. She understood that life would always present challenges, but she now had a quiet strength to meet them, nurtured through her love of music and the discipline it required. She also began to reflect on the mockery she had faced. She no longer felt bitterness or resentment. Instead, she saw it as a necessary part of her journey, a force that had pushed her to work harder, focus more, and discover her own resilience. Every laugh, every whisper, every doubt from others had become a stepping stone rather than a barrier. This understanding gave her peace, and it allowed her to approach life with grace and confidence. Her family continued to support her quietly, in ways both large and small. They celebrated her achievements without fanfare, encouraged her growth, and provided stability and love that became the foundation of her journey. The keyboard remained central in her life, a constant companion, a tool of expression, and a reminder of how far she had come. As she looked ahead, she realized that her journey was ongoing. There would be more challenges, more opportunities, and more moments of doubt. But she felt ready. She had faced ridicule, isolation, and self-doubt, and had emerged stronger, more confident, and more determined. She had discovered the power of persistence, the importance of self-belief, and the profound joy of following one's passion. These lessons would stay with her forever, shaping not only her music, but the person she was becoming. She began to imagine new dreams, larger stages, more ambitious pieces, and deeper expressions of emotion through music. She saw herself performing for audiences who had never heard her story, who would be touched not just by her talent, but by the authenticity and heart she put into every note. The thought filled her with excitement, a sense of purpose, and a quiet determination to continue her journey no matter where it led. In her room, late at night, she would sit at her keyboard, the soft glow of a lamp illuminating the keys. She played pieces she had mastered, experimented with new melodies, and allowed herself to dream. Each note was a reminder of her growth, her courage, and her journey. She played not just for herself, but for everyone who had doubted her, everyone who had laughed, and everyone who had inspired her to keep going, including herself. Her music became a language of its own. It spoke of perseverance, of hope, of triumph over adversity. She began to understand that the impact of her talent extended beyond applause and recognition. It could inspire, comfort, and encourage others in ways words often could not. She had become a quiet example of how dedication, passion, and belief in oneself could transform challenges into opportunities and doubt into achievement. Over time, her reputation as a talented pianist grew. People who had once overlooked her began to seek her out, asking her to perform, teaching others about her journey, and admiring the dedication she had shown. Yet she remained grounded. She remembered the quiet moments of struggle, the times she had practiced alone, and the fears she had overcome. Those moments kept her humble, reminding her that her success was built not only on talent, but on perseverance, courage, and heart. Through it all, she remained committed to her love of music above all else. She understood that the joy of playing, The expression of emotion and the connection with others through her art were far more important than accolades or attention. She continued to practice daily, learning new techniques, exploring new styles, and finding new ways to express herself. The keyboard, always present, remained her companion, teacher, and friend. Her story became one not just of triumph but of transformation. The girl who had once been mocked for her passion, who had endured ridicule and isolation, had grown into someone confident, skilled, and deeply connected to her music. She had turned challenges into lessons, mockery into motivation, and doubt into determination. Her journey was a testament to the power of perseverance, self-belief, and the quiet strength of following one's passion, no matter the obstacles. And though she had achieved so much already, she knew her journey was far from over. There were more stages, more performances, more opportunities to share her music and inspire others. There were still challenges to face, doubts to overcome, and moments of fear to confront. But she also knew that she now possessed the tools to meet them all, with courage, dedication, and a heart full of music. In the quiet of her room, with her fingers dancing over the keys, she felt a sense of peace and purpose. She had discovered who she was, what she loved, and what she was capable of. She had turned mockery into admiration, doubt into determination, and dreams into reality. And she knew deep within her heart that this was only the beginning of a life shaped by music, courage, and unwavering perseverance. Her journey had taught her that true success was not measured by the opinions of others, but by the strength to follow one's passion, the courage to face fear, and the ability to grow through every challenge. She had become an inspiration, not because she sought recognition, but because she had shown quietly and powerfully what it meant to believe in oneself, to persevere, and to let the heart lead the way. And so, every day she continued to play, to learn, and to dream. Each note, each melody, each performance was a reminder of how far she had come and how far she could still go. The girl who had once been mocked for loving the piano had become a symbol of resilience, determination, and the transformative power of passion. And with every key she pressed, she continued to inspire, to move, and to shine, touching hearts in ways words could never fully capture.